2.
Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to Bristol Schools Forum. We've got quite a jam-packed agenda for today, so we're going to move at quite a bit of a pace, just making sure that we cover all the items, but just wanted to let you know that we do have quite a bit of an agenda to go through today. I've reminded everyone about the muting and asking questions, etc., etc. So what I'll do first is then go to the main agenda item, and we've got two. Hopefully you've all received both items in relation to papers, because we had a second item that came through later on in the main pack. So in terms of the agenda today, so welcome everybody, and I'm going to just hand over now to Karina to take us through the first section, which talks about absences, etc.
Thank you, Sarah. Apologies from Trish Dodds and Cameron Shaw. We are quorate. We have had one resignation. Ruth Pickerskill has resigned from Forum. There's no new members to report. And the vacancies, we have 2 Academy Secondary Governor reps, 1 Academy Primary Governor rep, a Prue Governor, and a Clifton Diocese rep. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Karina. And whatever we can do in the background to support some of the recruitment to the forum will be very welcome. Thank you very much all. Okay, so I'm just going to, rather than going through page by page, in terms of the minutes, is there any reference points around accuracy that anyone wants to raise? Any other minutes? No, I can't see any hands up. Okay, that's great. So then I'll just take us through to the actions from our last meeting. And okay. So as an item, I think that's you, Travis, in relation to special schools and providing information to forum members in relation to the Teachers' Pay and Pension Grant. Has that now been actioned?
Yeah, there's the query from last time was how we've distributed the Teachers' Pay and Pension Grant. Now, the forum member who's raised that's had a separate a response from the SFA, which has been shared with me, and I've agreed with it. But I haven't shared any further detail on that yet.
No, I think that's fine. I think we can say that matter's closed then, because I know there's a specific query for one forum member, unless anyone else would like to raise that specifically. No, okay, great. Thank you, Travis. The next one, Alison, you weren't able to attend the last one, but you're definitely here today, so we'll get an update from you. That would be great. Now, I think this was Sam. There's a request in relation to Flora to attend the next meeting of the Early Years Task and Finish Group, and also a note about the RAG rating in relation to Education Transformation Plan.
Okay, so Kate Markley did attend the Early Years Task and Finish Group, and the Education Transformation Plan is RAG rated. So, but I haven't tabled anything tonight. I can send that round with the next set of minutes.
Okay, yes, I think that would be helpful. It was just, I think it's similar to the finance recovery program as well. If we're able to have that for the next one, that would be helpful. Yes, please. Okay. And there's also a comment around input from health colleagues. Sam, Alison, who would like to take that one?
Yeah, I think I had a look at that. I think probably what's best is if we circulate the outcome of the formal monitoring visit, the summary of the formal monitoring visit against a written statement of action, because that captures education, care and health input and impact. And I think that's probably what the forum wants to see.
Brilliant, thanks, Alison. I don't think it needs to be in too much detail. I think it was just referencing how that group works together with the schools. Great, thank you. Okay, any other minutes? So we definitely received the schools forum. Schools forum definitely received the consultation, so thank you for that, Travis. And we set up the finance subgroup who are going to feed back a bit later on today, so that's great. And the revised scheme for financing schools is going to be picked up later on as an agenda item. Okay, so I'm going to take us on then to agenda item 4, which is the Education Transformation plan, which is also includes your update, Alison, isn't it? So this paper is for our information, and you're going to take us through it and provide a bit of context. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah said, this is the main item in terms of the director's update for this session, and it's quite a detailed plan that you have and paper that you have against this. So I'm not going to go through too much detail, and hope obviously that you've read that. So it refers to the first document in the pack and builds on the programme update from the previous meeting that Sam will have taken you through. It's quite a detailed document, so I'm going to go through the key points and then allow some time at the end for questions or comments, mindful that there are other areas relating to this in the meeting this evening. So the paper that you have is a summary of the programme to date. And its initial focus and response was the response to the outcome of the 2019 SEND inspection, and it really enabled that early work to take place to ensure our systems and processes were fit for purpose. And so a lot of that early transformation work was really very much in line with the delivery of the written statement of action. So as anticipated, the increased compliance and output has seen an increase in spend in the high needs block. And so phase 2 has been reframed into the DSG management plan to support the development and ultimate delivery of the range of mitigations to manage that longer term cost pressures and ensure the system delivers best value. And I know some of you will be close to that as you're part of those task and finish groups in this space. So in terms of the financial impact of this work and forecast mitigations, these will be discussed in the next agenda item in greater detail. And there's also the decision to be made later in the meeting regarding the potential transfer of the 0.5% to support phase 3. So what I really want to do is kind of talk through that element of it, but mindful you won't be making a decision at the end of this particular section. So as part of the alignment of the DSG management plan, we've undertaken a self-assessment against the range of recommendations published by the DfE as part of their safety valve agreements with other local authorities who experience increased deficit budgets. And you'll see that in Appendix A that's part of this paper. And what we've done through that self-assessment is that we've realised that the majority of the phase 2 does align with some of those key recommendations. And we're reflecting this in the detail of the DSG management plan. There are some areas you'll see from that RAG rating that are not fully covered by phase 2. So we need to consider this as a focus for phase 3 if the funding is approved for that next phase. So as well as the self-assessment, we've also had a number of discussions with different groups of heads and through boards such as the Excellence in Schools group, which is Bristol Standards Board, to really understand how we can effectively improve inclusion across the city and be more creative about how that funding is targeted. And really focused on those discussions looking at strengthening that early support and intervention to ensure children and young people are better supported earlier as we move towards a system that delivers better value. And this is really timely for us as we're seeing those emerging needs post-COVID with significant increase in demand for statutory services. And certainly some of the conversations that we're having with our schools and settings are highlighting those emerging needs and some of those concerns as we come out of that period of lockdown and also that extended period of only partial opening of schools and settings. So therefore, what we've done is, in terms of the proposal for phase 3, if the funding is approved, we've come at this in a quite a different way from phase 2 and 3, and we split into 3 key areas of focus, which again are detailed in the plan that you have and the report that you have. So the first one is about retaining a much smaller amount within the local authority, and what that will focus on is continue to deliver some of those current projects that we either haven't completed or that have become significant focus during the work. We've also identified a small amount that we're proposing focuses on the amber and red areas, possibly particularly the red areas from the safety valve self-assessment, so looking at where we can fill some of those gaps. But actually our proposal is looking at moving the majority of funding and making the majority of funding available to the sector. So this is not only about supporting earlier intervention ideas, but developing a more sustainable system. And that sustainability is really important, particularly as if the hard funding formula goes through. This will be the last opportunity that funding can be directed in this way by Forum. So it's about that sustainability. It's about making sure we identify ways of working in more effective ways that go across localities. These would respond to some of those amber areas in the self-evaluation, and could be those programmes, as I said, that tackle some of that emerging needs as we come out of COVID, and particularly thinking around feedback I've had about emerging mental health needs, speech and language. So really what we're talking about here is building on that city-wide workforce development, linking up with organisations like the New Teaching School Hub, working across clusters of schools to respond to those emerging needs, thinking about, you know, a community of children rather than just individually. And most importantly, and this has been very much the feedback from heads, is the opportunity to share that specialist knowledge through peer-to-peer programmes and so on. So really very much looking at that 1 million being focused on sector-led improvement. So the idea would be that the sector would identify the area of focus, and we'd obviously give a framework for that. And as I say, look back at where we do have the gaps in those safety valve recommendations, and also really build on their operational knowledge of remaining areas for development. And the proposal is we would have some sort of bid system for funding to kind of test and deliver programmes and different ways of working. So that's really where we are in terms of our proposal for that phase 3 funding. As I say, I'm aware we still have the detail of the DSG management plan to discuss, and where we've seen the impact of the programme against some of those mitigations, we can unpack in a bit more detail there. But I'll stop here to take any questions as part of the transformation programme.
Great, thank you very much, Alison, and it's great to see progress in some of those, the first 2 phases and proposals around phase 3. And obviously we'll be discussing the transfer between schools block and high needs block in a bit more detail later on in the agenda. But in terms of what Alison's presented today, it's reassuring to see, you know, the plans around where that funding is going to be allocated potentially. Has anyone got any specific questions around what's included in the content, or any other comments? Aileen?
Hi, it's I really welcome the detail in this report. It's fantastic to see so much work going on in the local authority, and you know, some self-awareness about what needs doing. The school-led or the school-based program activity sounds incredibly interesting, and I just wonder, is there going to be a formalised application form to be part of that, and how will the panel be created? How can we ensure that there's transparency around all the processes?
Yeah, really good question. That's where our thinking has gone in terms of that transparency. And so the idea would be that it would be a very formal process, and that it would be through a formal application process as well. We would need to establish a board, some sort of board that would oversee and review those applications, and the proposal would be that would be, you know, from sector, obviously LA officers, and potentially parents and carers as well engaged in that. So it would be a wide stakeholder board that would be established. Once the actual applications have been submitted and reviewed and the funding allocated, we would then make sure there was that strong assurance and impact assessment as part of that as well. And then what we would look to really identify those programmes and test and learn that we can then scale up, either by redirecting future non-statutory future funding, or working with the sector to make it part of our business as usual as well. So the idea is that we really use this next 12 months, or from April, to do all of those tests and learn, to get the sector leading in this space, because ultimately, you know, there is only so much you can do as a local authority. It's what the experience of happening in those schools and settings on a day-to-day basis. And so where we've had conversations with individual heads, but also clusters of heads within the same community are coming together saying, I think we can do something differently here. I think we can, work in a different way to make sure that we have that early support and intervention in place. So for me, it's a really exciting step change for us that is about our future, not just about the kind of response to the inspection.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eileen. Any other questions for anyone else? No, I don't think so. Well, thank you very much, Alison, for taking us through proposals of where we've been and where we're going in terms of some of our plans. And I think we've now got Councillor Craig that's joined us. Very welcome. Did you want to say anything at all? You're very welcome to join Bristol Schools Forum, your first meeting.
It is. Hi, good evening, everyone. And yeah, I thought I would just sneak in.
Sorry, that didn't work.
Okay, but no, I'm really glad to be here. As you all know, I've now taken on the cabinet responsibility for children education and equality. So I will intervene if I need to at some point, but I'm just listening and hearing what's going on. And I'm on a very steep learning curve at this moment in time, but I'm fully immersed in the world of education, having had a background in this many years ago. So
excellent. Thank you very much. You're very welcome. And at any time you want to contribute or ask a question, then please do. Very appreciate your support with the forum's work. Excellent. Okay, just moving us on then to the next item, which is the separate paper, which is the DSG management plan. And the purpose of this report is to update us on the actual plan itself. And then there's a number of recommendations. So you just consider these as we go through the plan. But to note the update, to receive any feedback from the high needs and early years task groups, and consider any stakeholder engagement, and note that we'll get a next version in early spring. So in terms of who has taken us through this item, Abby, is that you? Excellent. Yeah, over to you,
yeah,
please.
That's me. My role is just to introduce the item. Actually, I'm sure people will have a lot of comments and suggestion and question to ask. So I won't take too much of everyone's time by talking through the paper. Apologies for not getting this through with the pack. We had to do some last minute topping and tailing of the paper. That was why I couldn't go in with the other pack. But this, what we've tried to do is, in June, we presented a more detailed paper on the DSG management plan to the forum and talked about the mechanism, all the various bits and bobs within it. So we've decided that this time around, we're not going to go through that again because it's just repetitive. But we've just tried to, inform the forum what has happened between June and now, what has changed in the management plan and the effect of various activities, actions, and intervention that has been happening within the sector, between June and now. The first few bits is just about introduction, the background to the DSG management plan. So I'm not going to, go through that in any detail. But in terms of development between June and now, in June we presented a management plan that forecast that we're forecasting a deficit of just short of 70 million by 2024-25. And that assumes that's a do nothing scenario in terms of that forecast at that point in time. And since then, the ESFA have issued a new template that extended the horizon of the forecast by another year to 2025-26. So that's one major difference between the last version of the management plan and this one. So it's been extended by one more year. Also, we've done a lot of work regarding a lot of what has been happening. We're all mindful of what's happening in COVID. and in terms of SEND support and the council's ability to meet some of the increasing needs locally, in terms of the number of children presenting to us as an authority, and sort of like, done a bit of analysis and trying to quantify the impact of COVID on our plan and a few other things. So the latest plan that has been extended by 1 more year, I keep on saying, is showing just about 89 million deficit, by 2025-26, and that is so we're trying to compare mitigated plans now, 70 million up to 24-25, 89 million by 25-26, still unmitigated. Within that, we've undertaken a few actions, a few activities that have, and we are aware of a few other things, and some of those are listed, on the at the top of page 4. So I'm not going to, go through everything one after the other. And also, what is very, informative is the fact that, we've made some assumptions around our income analysis. That's one of the things in the chart, and the mitigations that we've been working on in terms of developing hypotheses, which will then be tested and be consulted upon, and hopefully later this financial year and going into phase 3 of the transformation program, depending on what happens later on in this at this meeting. We believe that we can achieve some reduction in terms of that forecast, in terms of that deficit forecast of roughly about 40 million, and that will bring down the overall deficit to about 45 million by 25-26. And the impact of that is summarized in the table, on page 5, as well as graphically presented in the chart in terms of comparing the new unmitigated and the current mitigated version. But all of these activities come with risks and challenges, and it also comes with opportunities. And some of these are summarized at item 6 and I think on item 7, the opportunities that's available within that. Also mindful of the throughout the summer we've been having, I think we've had about 2 meetings each of the high needs and early years task and finish group, just to go through some of those hypotheses, just to discuss some of those things further, although we've not presented the minutes of those meetings here at this meeting. And I'm sure there are representatives of those task and finish groups that can contribute to the discussion as time progresses. That's what I've tried to highlight under item 8. So I'll just keep it short and sharp now, and then welcome comments and questions.
Great, thank you very much, Abby, for taking us through that. It's obviously some very large numbers that we're talking about, which we have talked about at previous meetings, and whatever we can do as members of Forum to support to bring that deficit under control. I think we definitely have a duty to make sure that we're following through with those. I think it's really helpful to have those risks and opportunities listed out like that. I think that's really clear for Forum members to see where the risks are around those figures, and also to see what mitigation we're putting in place to start to bring it back down and manage it. And like you say, it is a national picture, isn't it? This is something that's happening with many local authorities. Do we have any feedback from the subgroups for early years and high needs task and finish group? Rob, please.
I think there were 3 main points to report back to Forum from what we discussed. Obviously, we've got declining birth rates generally across the city, and so the impact of that will come into early years, obviously, before it will through other phases of education. So that's making the numbers looking as if they're moving a bit more our way, but that's because there will be less children in the system in the near future due to declining birth rates. But we're very mindful that the birth rates differ across the city, quite often to do with the deprivation of the wards. So this isn't a uniform picture that we're looking at across the city in terms of birth rates, and we'll have to be mindful about where the provision is provided in the future as a result. The second thing was that looking at all of these numbers and trends, and Richard and his team and the project team have provided lots of good numbers and evidence, but COVID makes predictions so challenging still for them and for us. And so every time we're looking at trends, you know, there are blips all over the place. And are they due to COVID? How much is due to COVID? That's a difficult analysis to take on. And thirdly, we still have going on in the background the whole reorganisation of early years. And until there's a bit more clarity about that, we're not really sure where the overall funding and spending picture what that looks like for early years. So we're very mindful in the early years sector that this reorganisation is going alongside. So, you know, when we're looking at our early years funding, a lot of that will be dependent on what's decided in that reorganisation. So they were the 3 points that arose from that. We also, as mentioned earlier, had someone from Flora come along to talk to us, and that was really useful discussion, I think, where we, I think the value of the work that Flora has done became very clear to the group, and it was also a great opportunity to discuss with the representative from Flora how that might be improved and better targeted, and improved dialogues with early years heads, in particular. So that was another very positive thing that came out of our last meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. I'm afraid I'm having a bit of internet issues, but hopefully everyone can still hear me. I think, Councillor Craig, you've got your hand up, please. Do you want to feedback? Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because obviously I recognise, you all recognise, this is a really challenging situation that we find ourselves in. We're seeing, I heard what your colleague just said about the declining numbers, but that doesn't take away the fact from we're seeing an increased demand on the high needs block. I'm really keen, and even though I haven't had a full discussion, like I said, I've been in this situation before many years ago around the DSG, and actually I was responsible for commissioning special needs education for children across the west of England. So one of the things I've been talking about, because I have spoken to other children needs members in other local authority areas, and yes, everyone is pained by the DSG, and they're seeing it going in the wrong direction. And so what I'd like us to maybe explore as part of the transformation programme, it's something myself and Alison and others have to have the conversation, is because I know our neighbouring authorities are in exactly the same position. So it's looking at how we can develop provision much more locally, but do it maybe as working collaboratively with our neighbours to develop the kind of provision that I think we need and we can see coming through from the data, the early years data that we have in terms of what the needs are. Because obviously we've seen an increase in demand for autism provision, but again, we have much more children with complex needs. So I just want to kind of put on record that, yeah, I am very much aware of the situation, and I want to work with officers and yourselves to really address this as a kind of matter of urgency, whilst at the same time still being able to help these children and support these children going forward.
Brilliant, thank you very much, and we definitely appreciate that support, and we're 100% behind the plans that we need to make and implement across the sector, but also supported pupils, of course. Thank you. Aileen?
Yes, thank you. The high needs task and finish group, we discussed a lot of the things that Asher and Rob have mentioned about the increase in complexity and in demand. And I think one of the things we discussed was demand management and how we work as a collaborative jointly to make sure that that we put in the interventions where they're needed. So there are increased number of applications coming through the system, and you know, with increased Senko training, there's a question, is it because the Senkos are identifying quickly where there is a need? And that's really positive, but then it would be better if that need could be met further downstream. So there is a lot of discussion about how that can influence the final picture. Bristol's issuing great number of plans, which is really heartening, because there was a period when few plans were finalised, but there's not always somewhere for the pupils, or the right provision for the pupils at the end of the plan. And at the moment, there's more demand than capacity within the team. And that's a real concern, because that will then lead to a backlog and service users and children being in provisions that are not appropriate for to meet their needs. I think there's a lot of work going on, and I was really heartened to see it's a really sort of clear plans. I think it's just, as Asha says, it's a national situation. And Bristol's in a similar position to so many other cities. And what we actually need is properly funded SEN provision for all the pupils with needs in the city. And that's something that we need to talk to the government about, I think. I think the issue with the predicted increase in demand is one that is very concerning, and the work with the workforce within schools, within early years and primary schools and secondary schools, to meet the demand, identify needs earlier and meet those needs within the mainstream setting, is going to be the piece of work that's going to make the most difference in the end. And I think it's really positive to see that how all this links together with the other things that are going on within the local authority to reduce the spend in high need. I don't know if anybody else, I mean, it was myself and a number of officers, but I don't know if they'd like to add anything about the meeting.
I think, Aileen, you've summed it up really well, and obviously with the detail in the DSG management plan and then the education transformation programme, it kind of gives that full picture in terms of where we are, and also the discussions that we had about it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. Is there any other questions on this particular paper?
Yeah, Sarah, can I just quickly add? I mean, this is the problem that we have, and you're right. We need to go back to the funding has just not kept up with the demand that we're having. So it feels like we're in a constant no-win situation here. And as I said, I've spoken to other cabinet lead members in other local authorities across the country, and this really is getting to a crisis point, I think. So anything that we can do, we're doing what we can to also press government, but we also want to see as we know, the SEND review is happening. Hopefully it'll be completed. But again, I urge all colleagues to make sure that we make make our views known.
Absolutely, and I completely agree about the keeping up with the demand, and that we've talked about. It is something that's happening in many LAs, if not the majority of them. But I know there have been some meetings with the DfE regarding the safety valve meetings, hasn't there, in relation to managing that. Denise, did you want to come in here, please?
I did, yes. So thank you, Sarah. I think the key point I wanted probably Forum to reflect on is just the level of detail and the work that is taking place, and how far we've come forward in terms of where we were, the level of data that's now being provided by the team and colleagues to enable us to have those more detailed conversations about where interventions could be most effective. And I think, I'd obviously reiterate the points the colleagues have made in terms of, we recognise that there is a need for additional funding in the system. But I also don't want us to move away from the fact that actually, the legacy deficit it's a local issue, and we need to own that and to actually, think about how some of the interventions will help to drive that. So yes, we do recognise that there is a need for additional funding, but we also need to ensure that we can manage to get the DSG onto a sustainable footing, and also to be able to live within the means, whatever that funding envelope is that will come from government at different points. So just wanting to ensure that we have that on record, and note that the local ownership, and that we do actually fully, own that, and are driving forward the changes that we think are required that will start to make that change. And I'm hoping that that Forum can see the level of detail now that is being provided, and the scale of the opportunities that the transformation programme and that resource has been able to bring, and being able to have the type of discussions and to see the data you have wouldn't have been available previously without that programme. So again, just hoping we get the support in terms of continuing on with this work, because without this, we're not going to be able to make the changes we need. And I think we've got a clear plan now. And I think if we all support each other in driving that forward, then again, it will both improve outcomes, but also help us to get to a sustainable position going forward.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful summary, Denise, and completely understand the current challenges. And we as forum members really appreciate, I think, the level of detail that we're getting at the moment, and the smaller working groups, but also the quality of the feedback that we get in the report. So thank you very much for that. Okay, are there any other items, any other comments on this item? No. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'll move us then on to the next item, which is number 6, which is an update on this year's Dedicated Schools grant and where we are at the position at the end of September. Now, I think that is Angel. Angel, are you taking us through that one?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good evening. This paper is to give you an update on where we are as at end of September, because at the time the paper needs to be issued and the October position hasn't gone through cabinets yet. So it should be issued next Monday. If you're interested in the October position, please do check out next Monday, and it should be published. So as at end of September, we have forecasted an £14.5 million overspend for this financial year, from April 2021 to next March 2022. And the main overspend is from high needs block again. As you probably aware of already, we have experienced the pressure mainly in top-ups. There is the Appendix 1 in the paper, which you can see there's a breakdown of different settings and top-up demands from, for instance, special schools. Almost £5 million overspend being reported, being forecasted, sorry. And also the pressures coming from mainstream schools as well, and GFE, and pretty much, and PRUs as well. So pretty much all settings we experience the pressure, and that's on top-ups. And the other elements of high needs block overspend is coming from, again, the placements again. So almost £15 million high needs block overspend is being forecasted at the end of this financial year. And there's £466,000 overspend being forecasted in early years block as well, which is mainly due to SEN top-up demand again, and currently forecasting an deficit of 571,000 at the end of this financial year, slightly offset by a 2-year-old funding and staffing demand, which is slightly lower than budget. In terms of the schools block, we're currently forecasting a small underspend of 840,000, which is made up of main schools element and growth fund. Main schools element underspend is because we've closed 3 schools and opened 1, so there is net movement of 480,000 favorable underspend to our favorite. and the growth fund. And so currently we predict an underspend of 361,000. That makes up to the 840,000 underspend. But the growth fund element, it could change as we progress into the year. So there is no variance expected from the school's central services block. The transformation project is, anticipated a full spend of £1.4 million allocation as well. I don't know if you have any questions, as as you already heard, this is a national challenge. The local authority has already shared with you, we have a plan to manage, to contain and control the deficit, and to ensure that we are sustainable in the long term and going forward, while we obviously, hoping and awaiting the government, to allocate appropriate funding to meet the demands. But we have a plan to address it. So thank you. I don't know if you got any questions for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Angel. I think we've just talked through, the challenges that we're currently facing in relation to the deficit. So it's important that we note where we are year to date in terms of the current position. But I don't think there's significantly much to feedback on this section. But has anyone got any comments they'd like to make or questions? No. Okay, well, thank you very much for that item. Okay, that now takes us on then to the schools block funding formula consultation, where we do have to vote on a number of items. And in terms of who's going to take us through that one, Travis, I think that one's for you, isn't it? So if you're able to feedback on the decisions, give us an overview of the decisions that we need to make. And then I'll take us through each one as we go through the meeting. I am having a few internet issues, so I'm just going to leave the meeting and rejoin. But Travis, if you could take over on your section, please, that would be great.
All right, thank you, Chair. Okay, so yes, again, forum members, long-standing forum members, will be very familiar with this paper. The timescales we work to issue the funding formula of get very tight, very pressured this time of year. So always in this meeting, we ask for some direction and some decisions in principle how we want to apply the funding formula, so that when the actual allocation comes towards the end of December, we can present to you the actual outcomes in January, at January's meeting, in time for your agreement or not, and we can submit that to the ESFA, usually around about the 16th of January. But the considerations again are that the ESFA's updated the principles of the formula again, so slightly revised national funding formula unit values. The minimum per pupil funding has been increased slightly again, but the things we need to decide upon really are whether we accept there's going to be any transfer or not from the schools block to high needs to support the transformation programme, the value of the minimum funding guarantee, what value we wish to set for the funding factors, including the lump sum, and if we prioritise towards any particular sector, and then how we allocate any funding for a growth fund. The paper as presented does not propose reinstating a falling rolls fund as at the moment. The dormant policy for falling rolls is supporting secondary schools which are experiencing growth, and the criteria as demanded by the SFA around the application of falling rolls fund would be difficult to apply to our primary schools as they currently stand. Very briefly, that's what it is. The subgroup met last month to consider these issues in a bit more detail. The paper explores some of these issues in a bit more detail, and there is some indicative modelling based on the indicative funding values, which was used to help inform some of the decisions from that subgroup. But if I can pass to Simon to take us through the subgroup, please, the decisions which were reached at that point, and then.
Thanks, Travis. Yes, the subgroup met a month or so ago now. Thanks to colleagues who helped be part of that, and also thanks to Travis and colleagues for the detailed work and the spreadsheets that go behind everything, which I think everyone agrees that once you can actually see some numbers to particular models and stuff, it kind of becomes a bit clearer. So the sort of things that we were considering are those kind of 5 points under 2.2 about how much to transfer, if at all, to the high needs block, through to E about the growth fund. I think on the first point there, that on the transfer of the 0.5 high needs block, I think everyone recognises the pressure that the high needs block is under. And I think in principle, we supported that. But I think there were a couple of things that we wanted everyone to consider on that. And the first point was, you know, in terms of how much that money is, in terms of how much the high needs is in debt, is it just a drop in the ocean? Therefore, is it actually better to keep that still in the schools block? And secondly, I think at the time, obviously, we hadn't seen the paper that was presented to us saying what's been happening in the transformation programme. So if we were going to assign 0.5% to that programme, I think colleagues wanted to see the kind of the substance of what had happened in the previous, you know, for the previous year before it committed to that. I don't know whether anyone who was there at the time or anyone who's part of the forum now. I mean, I think there is then obviously a bit more evidence now as to what's been done, and probably hopefully colleagues will recognise that there's a bit more happiness in terms of transferring to the high needs block. There's point C about the retaining the lump sum at current level. I think it's probably the one area we can get less excited about, but I think the consensus was to leave it at that current level. The main item of sorry, I've missed out the minimum funding guarantee. That and the sort of allocation of any spare funding is the one that sort of dominated the discussion. And Travis and his team sort of presented a couple of options. Historically, we have kind of tended to want that MFG at 0.5% just to enable, because that effectively frees up money to be distributed in the way that the members want it to be. And historically, you know, if that's been around deprivation, that MFG allows you to do that. Whereas if you have MFG too high, schools whose characteristics are changing, deprivation's falling, they get that protection continuously or more protection. And I think there's a feeling that that's probably a little unfair. So I think the consensus was the MFG at 0.5% is the best position for that to be. And then the other discussion point really around the spare funding is, you know, how best to allocate that, how fair is to allocate. And obviously because of the differences in all our schools, you know, there isn't one answer that benefits all schools. So, you know, obviously when you spread it out, your options are to increase your unit funding or to put them in your additional ones around deprivation. And I think people tended to favour putting more money towards the deprivation factors. So I think the one that we recommended was the one that kind of benefits the most schools. Yeah, I don't know if any other colleagues who were there think I've missed anything. I guess the only other thing about the growth fund that we talked about was, I know this is a discussion point that's been raised quite a lot in the past. I think the feeling of the subcommittee, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, the feeling was that if a school, you know, came to an agreement with the local authority to expand, that we felt it was unfair if changes happened to that school, that they could actually lose that funding at some point during, you know, the commitment. So if there was a commitment to, you know, to expand the school for 5 years or for 7 years or whatever it is, that commitment should be there throughout the whole time. Now we know we can't commit to that because it's something that gets reviewed each year, but we felt strongly that should be protected as much as possible. And I know historically I've had a conflict to that because one of my schools has benefited from that, but that is no longer the case. So I don't have that conflict anymore. So, but I feel that's very much should be in place for schools that commit to that. I think that's probably enough for me.
Very much, Travis and Simon, and I rejoined the meeting and I can see you all, which is a good thing when chairing a meeting, so that's good. Thank you very much for that feedback. It's obviously one of the key parts of what our decision making, that we consider this during the academic year. We've also consulted with schools, and apologies if this was covered when I was rejoining, but we've had some responses that are included in the paper, aren't they, Travis? We've got 37 responses from our schools, which had hoped that perhaps we'd have a few more responses.
37 is good by normal standards.
Okay, that's good. Good. Oh, I'm glad it's improving then. But generally, the gist of that feedback, please.
Yeah. So the consultation, so agreeing. So of the 37 schools, not every school answered every question, but in terms of the block transfer, 23 supported 0.5% and 13 didn't. Agreeing to 0.5% of MFG, 36 supported that and 1 didn't. Supporting the additional educational needs, that's deprivation, prior attainment and EAL, is the preference of 31, with 6 either preferring supporting the ORPU or something else. And whether we favour all schools equally or direct funding towards primary schools was more split, with 18 for all and 19 for primary sector benefiting more greatly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Right, okay, so in terms of next steps then, so we've got in the papers, we've got a couple of sections. So there's 2.2, Travis, and 6.32. Can I just check which ones we actually need to approve on? Is it the items that are listed in 6.3?
Well, yeah, what we're asking for now is some direction, really. So the actual decision will be made in January once we present the actual funding formula with the actual allocations, but so that we don't present you with like 25 different models and options. This is where if you know got a firm direction on what's preferred, then this is what we're asking you to indicate now. So 6.32 is suggesting of the LA's preference, where we do the bulk transfer, we have 0.5% of 0.5% MFG, we keep the lump sum, we direct the money towards the additional education needs, and there's no bias in the factor, and we take £2 million for growth fund, whereas the initial opening part of the report is actually just saying it's kind of your choice at the moment.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so as Travis has just outlined for us, these are our perspective at this stage. We didn't have to make a decision until January, but I think it's very important that we give a clear steer at this stage in terms of our intention. So if we look at one of the main ones that's being considered, which is that block transfer from schools block to high needs, and I think
we're losing you, Sarah, a little bit. I don't know if that's just me. I think we have
Simon, I think that's a very good point that you've raised about making sure that there is
same for me too.
real transparency around what that money would be used at is supported by the forum.
Sarah, can you hear me? Okay, I think we might have lost her. I think if we just pause and see whether she righted the critical.
From my perspective, I think Alison and other colleagues have really outlined
Okay, let's pause for a moment and see if Sarah's able to get herself back in.
This highlights the issue when you don't have a vice chair.
I was going to ask Karina actually what the we'd need to.
Oh, Sarah's coming back in, but we would need to elect one of the members, because local authority officers aren't able to chair the meeting.
Absolutely.
Sorry. I'm very sorry. I'm back, hopefully, to stay. I'll try not to flick too much between papers, which is obviously causing some sort of issue. Why is it always works when you need it? It doesn't work when you need it to work. Right. So I don't know how much of that you heard, but effectively,
a lot.
So effectively, main decision, one of the main decisions from this paper is about our support of the schools block transfer to high needs. And I take the point that you mentioned, Simon, about having confidence that money is going to be used wisely. And I think what Alison and other colleagues have shown to us today is how much that money would be of strategic importance to make sure the transformation programme is actually delivered. So from my perspective, I think that's a really strong steer that we should support this proposal. But I'll open up now to any comments specifically on that element that we need to decide, well, at least give a steer on today. Does anyone have any concerns with that approach? And I think what we're seeing is that from the consultation feedback as well, it would be largely supported by the majority of schools that fed back. So I can assume that we are as a forum. Rob.
Sorry, Karina, can you just clarify? I know that in early years, we are and aren't allowed to vote on certain things. And I realise we're not actually voting tonight, but it would just be useful in terms of at some point a clarification of what early years has a say in. So Simon and I guess, as representative of early years, because I think in previous years, maybe these decisions about transfers of schools block into high needs, we've not been able to input into.
So the advice is schools, academy, scholar members, academy members, PVI reps can vote on funding formula.
Okay.
So it's the unions and the dioceses that can't vote.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. So are there any comments from anyone in relation to what's been proposed?
Just maybe, Sarah, just maybe one thing I want to say. So yeah, I think that's it's a good transfer because it gives means to our ambition with this higher transformation plan. And in the past 5 years, it's the first time I'm start seeing some evidence, as you mentioned, Sarah, earlier. So I think it's a positive trend there, and we need to support that as a forum here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Cedric. So I think we can take that as an early indication that we would support that proposal, but obviously we'll have the full decision making in the January meeting. So the other items are in relation to the MFG at positive of 0.5%. I think it is something that we've adopted in previous funding formula consultations and decision making. We also can look at the other items which are around prioritising pupils with additional educational needs, which I think again is something that we've focused on previously as well. So in terms of those two items specifically, is there anything anyone wanted to feedback on those, or would they largely feel at this stage that they would support them? I can't see if any hands are raised. So I'm going to assume that people are happy to support that. Okay, and also I think we've noted around the growth fund. I think we're not reviewing the policy this time, but Simon, thank you very much for that feedback from the group. I think that's an important one to take away and consider. This is more around how much we make available for that growth fund. So we'll, in terms of the proposal around the £2 million, I think that seems a reasonable suggestion at this stage, but we'll wait to hear more once we actually know what the allocation is in January. Any thoughts on that one in particular? No? Okay, is that everything that you need from us at this stage, Travis?
Yeah, that's very helpful, thank you. So the next steps will be that when the ESFA release the allocations for all 4 blocks, will apply this steer to that funding, and then we'll present to you what it actually looks like at January. Hopefully there's nothing too strange or odd out of that. If there is, we'll bring different options, but as we did last year. But thank you very much. That makes January a lot simpler, hopefully. Great.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Travis, and also Simon and the subgroup who reviewed the proposals in detail. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so I'll take us on to the next item, which is dedelegation. So this is for our maintained schools. Just going back to previous points around who can vote on different items. So we are being asked to, so those who are representing maintained schools, so we are actually being asked to approve dedelegation. So I'm going to take this one over to Abby. Are you taking us through this one?
No, I think it's going to be me.
Oh, sorry, Travis, it's you too. Over to you.
So part of the same consultation with schools, there's a second section asking them to express their preference on the dedelegation of services, certain services as provided by the local authority. The paper goes into detail on the services and the voting outcome, but we're not compelled by that consultation response. It is decision of school forum members, the maintained representatives of school forum members. So yeah, can we can go into some detail, but I'll always just have a look at it.
Yeah, of course. Okay, that's fine. Well, should we start with the primary school proposals and talk through? So effectively, it's 2.2 in the papers, item 8. There is an agreement to delegate following 6 items. Hopefully, everyone's got access to the papers. I won't go through all 6 of those, unless anyone wants to obviously take one item out and specifically talk about that one. But if we look at them at block initially, is there any initial comments or feedback for Travis? And I can't quite see everybody, so if there's anything, there we go. Are there any hands up? Chris?
Yeah. It's just a couple of things with regards to a few of the items. I've raised the fact that RPA was now available for schools to utilise, and under point 5.15, it comes back that there's an excess limit that schools wouldn't be able to self-fund. I'm not sure the last comment on there. It doesn't seem as though it's finished. So I don't understand what part it says that legally required cover in place in respect of motor. Should there be a further part of that sentence?
What page is it on, please?
Sorry, page 45.
Travis, is there anything to say on that one, please?
There's a full stop straight after it, so I think perhaps there's nothing missing. The wording came from the insurance team for this, but I can check that if you want.
Because I'm just wondering what requirements there would be for motor, I don't know, insurance or something like that for schools.
Can anyone answer that? I know the RPA doesn't actually cover motor insurance, does it? So it is a requirement the schools have to procure that separately. I don't know if that's cost prohibitive or not, but is anyone able to comment on that one?
Because overall, if you look at the, given the fact we've got, 16,000 pupils and that kind of stuff, there's an overall financial saving of about £200,000 on insurance for schools. So obviously, whilst I can understand if it's down to the excess limit, which would be prohibitive for schools to actually fund it themselves, then I can understand it. But, that's a £200,000 cost to schools. It could have been or could be avoided.
Well, this is a challenging one because it's quite a detailed question, isn't it? So I'll just see if there's anyone who's able to actually, have we done any specific analysis on insurance? Travis, Abby, Angel, anyone feedback on that specifically?
Again, I'm not an insurance officer, but we did get some words from the insurance colleagues, and particularly around the RPA. It says covers not included or points to note engineering inspection, engineering insurance, motor insurance, occasional business use, and works in progress. Excesses, there's a table for excess. I'd probably suggest if people need detail, then to contact the SFA to talk about the RPA or our insurance team for particular. But excesses, well, depends what the claim is, what the liability is.
Okay. So in terms of the proposal for insurance, we're saying that we should de-delegate all of it. Yes, is that right?
So the option to de-delegate does not preclude from our schools from buying into the LA or individually if they wanted to. If you vote to de-delegate, then we will top slice for all the maintained mainstream schools, and they will be in the successor LA insurance program. If the vote is not to de-delegate, then the LA may still have an insurance offer. That procurement's happening at the moment. But it'd be up to individual schools to buy in individually, potentially, right, with the admin that would involve as well. So,
okay, so there's still an option there. Should we decide not to? Chris, you particularly raised this one, and I know you're representing primary school specifically, so I know it's relevant to the schools that you're representing. I think this is quite a detailed one, so I wouldn't want to not make a decision on it unless we felt that it was something that really needed further analysis. So I'm looking to you really to sort of get your feedback on it.
Well, the thing being, I attended I can't think if it was a DFE or an ESFA meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they were actively promoting RPA for local authorities to do it on behalf of schools within the local authority. I haven't got the in-depth detail that obviously the insurance team have to say what's in, what's out, what the potential risks of moving to RPA. So it's very difficult for me to go away from using or suggesting the council one. But I'm guessing that if we go with the council one this evening, that's a 5-year commitment again.
Travis, could you just confirm the commitment for us, and if this is something we do need to decide today, or can we defer the insurance particular question until January?
Okay, I can't confirm the duration because that's still out for procurement at the moment, but talking to colleagues, it would be for at least 3 years arrangement. The consideration, I say, final decision on formula doesn't have to be made until January's meeting when you get the real numbers. This one element could be part of that to decide on to present an option with this de-delegated and then with this delegated, and then you make that decision for all maintained mainstream schools at that point. I don't want to be a salesman either way, but again, on the note that I've got from insurance colleagues, they're describing the RPA as not an insurance scheme as such, but a mechanism through which the cost of risk would be covered by government funds on a fixed price per pupil basis. It doesn't cover, as I've already said, engineering inspection, doesn't cover engineering insurance, doesn't cover motor insurance, doesn't cover works in progress or up to a very fixed limit. Excesses would have to be found by the individual establishment, and also opting into the LA scheme, your claims handling is done for you by the local authority. Your risk management advice is done for you by the local authority. There's other value added services such as fire security and things like that also available as part of that. And they've put it down as a note. It may not be worth mentioning, but they do question what the future of the RPA may look like because that's not controlled by us. We don't know.
Okay, thank you very much, Travis. That's really helpful. So the RPA has been around for academies for a number of years, and I know you gave a really good summary in terms of what is in it and what is out, and then therefore what the benefits are from staying in the LA offer. Chris, if it's all right with you, we can take that one out, and if you work with Travis to sort of understand a little bit more, and insurance colleagues at the council, to understand that point specifically, because I do think it is a new offer that's available, so one that probably needs a bit of due consideration. Were you happy with that approach?
Yeah, that's fine. You know, even with the stuff that Travis has just highlighted there, is it, you know, to flag what the major differences are and what the risks, etc., that aren't included, but to understand the full implications of what we would, shall we say, not have if we went with RPA, and the risks associated with doing that. That may steer, you know, back towards the council offer in any way, but with something that's, if you like, 2/3 of the price, and I know not everything is down to price, but it is a considerable amount of money.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and thank you for raising that. Did you have any other points on any of the other items?
Chair, can I just ask a question just in terms of that particular item? I think it would be really helpful, Chris, if we're able to just clarify what the additional information is that we need, so that we can go back firmly to our insurance team. And what we will do is also come back to you in terms of what the deadline is for them to make the decision, because I understand they are either out to tender at the moment or about to go out to tender. So they'll need to be clear on whether or not this is in scope or out. So we can come back and confirm that. And if we can confirm the additional information, then we can circulate a supplementary paper to Forum if necessary, if we do need to have an earlier decision.
So yeah, I think if it could be, if you like, the difference between what the anticipated local authority offering will include that the RPA doesn't. Yeah. So that we're just clear that, okay, so we're paying an extra £11 per pupil. However, it does cover these scenarios, which the RPA doesn't.
Okay, great, understand, excellent. So we'll do that, and we'll also just confirm any timelines for any decisions, and also the sort of potential contractual terms that they may be entering into as well. So that's clear for you all.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay,
Chris,
yeah, sorry. Yeah, I've just got let's have a look. The free school meals one, it's not about the costs or anything like that. It's I brought this up on a number of occasions, is that within the free school meals, it says it's a new product, but we've been going for 4 years now and it's still not working particularly well. And especially when we're trying to get as many pupils who are eligible to be free school meals entitlement, can somebody confirm, because I've tried this before and it doesn't seem to get an answer, that the free school meals eligibility is checked on a regular basis, i.e. every week? So if somebody puts an application in, it's regularly rechecked to see if circumstances have changed for that family, because I've got the feedback that I'm getting is that it's only checked the once at the time of submission.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Is anyone able to answer that question specifically, or do we need to take that one away? Alison?
I don't know the answer to that unless any other officer in the room does, so I suggest I take that away and provide a response.
Great, thanks, Alison. I think we can recognise that obviously there's going to be quite more families now eligible, which is what we're seeing across, you know, Bristol and lots of other areas across the country. So making sure that is an effective service is obviously incredibly important. But I think what we're deciding is that, you know, there might be some service tweaks that we need to consider, but it's whether or not we want to progress with that dedelegation. So if I just take the primary one first of all. In terms of, so as we're on Zoom and as we've done previously, it's going to be a case of more around if anyone objects, if we remove the insurance one, if anyone specifically rejects the proposal who's got voting rights, and if anyone needs clarity over who can vote on what, then please let Karina know. But does anyone have any objections to dedelegation of the other 5 items excluding insurance?
Yes, Sarah.
Oh, sorry, Cedric, yeah.
Yeah, for the school in financial difficulty, I mean, there's some budget at the moment to carry forward, so I'm not sure it's really used. So I would propose that to delegate to school, as opposed to what we had from the consultation. And I will be also proposing delegate for the EP as well, which is more balanced on what we see from the consultation.
Right, okay.
So there's two that I will vote against what is in consultation there.
Okay, so against this, right.
And can I say as well, Sarah, that the two that the three very similar to Cedric. The schools in financial difficulty, I would say a nil contribution this year, as I would do for the trade union facility, because that's still got £240,000 sat in there. Still want the service and obviously still want to carry on, but we still got, from what I'm reading, is 240,000 in there. And I would go to the education psychology.
Okay, right. So just as a reminder, and David, I'll come to you in a second. Karina, who has voting rights for this section, please, just so we know what we need to do on this one.
So for the primary, maintained,
yes, please.
Reps are Melanie, Chris, Kate and Cedric. Secondary, we've just got Simon Shaw.
Okay. Right. So I think what I might have to do then is go through each one, and then Karina, if you could actually make a note of who is voting for it and who is against. So David, do you want to talk about trade union facilities time, I imagine?
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I've got a kind of few statements. Can people hear me all right? Because my internet is a little bit, I'm not sure if it's your end or my end, but I'm going in and out. It's terrible. Yeah, I've just got some things written by NEU and NSUWT and my colleagues. And I know most people know this stuff already, but in case people don't really with what we do and what our facilities pot is used for, because I think sometimes there's a little bit of misunderstanding with some schools that we go into what the money is used for. You know, obviously it doesn't actually go to the trade unions. It's intended to reimburse my employer, our employers, if we're an elected representative. So I'm still employed by my school, and obviously the money that I take from the facilities pot 2 days a week goes to reimburse my school to cover my teaching for those 2 days. So I think sometimes, I don't know if that's always clear to people where the money goes, but so it doesn't go to the trade unions. I'm still employed by a school, as we all are. So the money goes back to schools essentially. And just to point out, you know, we do think it is, I mean, I looked at the figures last year, working out per school, or this year, per member of staff that's covered by a union. And I think I worked out as about £25 per member of staff for the whole year in a big school. It looks like a big sum of money when it comes out, but for what you get for that £25 for each member of staff, I think you get really, you know, smooth and well communicated industrial relations. And I think in the long run, it often saves money by retaining staff and reducing sickness absence in our experience, because we can help negotiate helping staff back to work. So, you know, I don't think for that sum per member of staff is a huge sum of money. And obviously some procedures just can't happen without us being there, really, without proper consultation and representation, obviously capability, disciplinaries and redundancies. And just regarding the pot size, I know that Chris, you raised, the only thing that actually Rob from the NSUWT has pointed out, he emailed me today, is just to say the pot is probably not as large as it seems. It's calculated, obviously, we don't have full confidence, and that's no offense to people that are putting that figure out there, but that figure is not necessarily what is in there. So it's calculated from April to April, some from September to September. So it's hard to know where we're at the moment. Sometimes employers have left their claim on the fund. So for example, my school is owed 2 years, so that needs to come off it. They haven't claimed. So the actual figure that you see is not necessarily what's there, and I don't think it is as large as you say. So the actual figure presented now might well be distorted. And also much of the money comes from academies. That is an estimated sum whose participation in the fund is not certain each year. So again, that can't ever be guaranteed. And just to point out, last year we did defer our payment as you know, as a sign of goodwill. So we did, you know, because there was money in the pot. So I mean, I do understand there's money in the pot, but I would say, you know, as far as deferring a payment again in some areas, I would ask that, you know, I'm not saying we wouldn't be willing to do that, but we'd have to be sort of check what's there in real terms and see what there is. Obviously, if there's enough to cover everything, there's no reason we wouldn't be willing to do that again. But yes, we did do it last year. So anyway, And just the fact that there is money left in the pot is a good sign. Actually, we're just trying to use as little of it as possible, really. So we are trying to use as few facility days as possible. I have 2 days, for example, and I still teach full time 3 days. So I don't take, you know, the whole week. We try to use as few as we can, and it's quite a big workload on 2 days. So yeah, anyway, that's my bit.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for giving us that context around trade union support. I think we all agree that it's great for our members. It's more about how much we put into that pot this year, I think, is what I'm hearing from colleagues. So if I just take us through each item, and if the 4 people who have got voting rights could raise their hand in support, or well, we'll take it one by one. So insurance we're going to exclude for the next meeting. So free school meals, is anyone could everyone raise their hand if they're in support of the 4 members?
Very good.
Karina, have we got that? So I think that's everybody, isn't it, who is in support of that? That's great. The next one is maternity supply cover. Yeah.
Sorry.
Chris, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's full support of that one. Trade union facilities time.
Oh, trade union. Does it schools in financial difficulty next?
Yes, sorry,
Right.
that's my fault. I do apologise. I was reading the wrong list. This is one of the challenges of these meetings I think I've done. All right, here we go. So this one is schools in financial difficulty. So who would support the proposal? So I think what we're saying is that, so we haven't got any hands up for that one. So I think what we're saying is that we agree that the fund should be carried over from this last year, but not necessarily added to it, because it doesn't seem to be much call for it at the moment, I think is what we're hearing. So we agree that the fund should be there, but not to add to it this year. Okay. Then the next one, trade union facilities time. In terms of the current proposal that's in the paper, who would support that of the 4?
Well, can I just ask a question on that? Obviously, having listened to, was it David from the union?
Yep.
You know, we've got a statement that says there's £218,000 in there. David's obviously outlining that there are things still to come in and be deducted, and whether stuff actually comes in. How can we get a good picture of what's actually in there?
I think that's more of a finance question, isn't it? Travis, is that one you can answer?
Yeah. So the figure in the report is the carried forwards figure into this year. As David's outlined, there are a number of transactions going through, some of which we know about, some of which he's just told us about. But essentially, well, the same as everything, that £40,000 has been claimed against that one so far. So as long as the fund is solvent, as long as there's something in there, then.
Yeah. So is the pot going to run out if we don't put any money in, Travis?
I would hope not, and based on previous years, probably not. No, but there are a number of transactions. This year we've taken academy contributions as well, which has been we changed our approach to charging academies for their contribution as well, which has been a little bit controversial with some of them. So that pot will probably decrease, as we've discussed in previous meetings.
Okay. So we've got Cedric, you're in support. Chris, I think you've got some hesitation around there.
No, I'm happy to support that, but could we ask then that when it comes to this time next year, like David mentioned there, that his school hasn't claimed for 2 years, that there's a note that goes out to say, could people claim, so that we get a true picture of where the finances are?
Yep, I think that's a fair point.
I think just to quickly add, I think with my school, it's down to COVID and lots of confusion with just, probably their end, not, their mistake. But
just so we can get a true picture of where the finances are, that's all I would say, if possible, please.
Yeah, and I think we, if officers could take that one away as well, that would be great. Thank you. So we've got that one approved. And then finally, education psychology. Cedric, you mentioned a particular hesitation around that one. What is your concern?
For me, it's maybe a service that school can seek, and yeah, I would prefer, there's a 2% increase for, I think, for this year, for the service for next year, and I think there's potentially some option available around that. So yeah, for me, I would prefer to keep that with school really at the moment.
So keep that with the school, able to procure it themselves, you mean directly?
Yes.
Okay, rather than contributing to it. Okay. So
sorry, can I comment on that, Sarah, as well? I thought there was just a good comment that someone had made on the survey, just about clarifying what service we're getting when we pay into the website, because we do obviously have to pay daily rate to have the educational psychologist as well, which I think is around £500 a day at the moment, which is, obviously there are probably more competitive rates out there. So it's just some of these things. It's not that I object really to paying a small amount per pupil in de-delegation, but it's more about sort of clarity about what we're actually getting with that.
You want me to come in, Sarah?
Yes, please, Alison. Yeah.
And so what this is focused on is those discussions around children and young people with emerging needs. So it's part of that sort of early intervention and support for schools, where there will be an allocated amount of time where an educational psychologist will be available to discuss individuals. So it will be the EP visit to schools, response to need, looking at provision that's in place. So it's that sort of initial response, as opposed to a targeted piece of work that you might purchase.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Does that answer your question, Melanie? Yeah, great. Okay, so we'll go to voting then. So who would support the de-delegation? Can I have a hands, please? So I think we're saying that we wouldn't support it at the moment. Okay, so we've got Kate and Melanie supporting it, and then 2 against. Is that right, Karina? Sorry, Karina, is that right?
Yes, I thought Melanie and Kate voted for.
Yep, and then Cedric's against. Chris?
No, I don't want to.
Okay. Oh, what do we do here? What do we do here? Karina?
Well, it's the Constitution that says the chair has a casting vote, but obviously as chair you're not voting in the first place. So
I think this is one to take away and defer to the next meeting, because we don't have to decide now, do we? So I think I will get feedback from the reps on forum to hear their concerns and share those with officers, and we'll bring that one back to the next meeting. Okay, is everyone comfortable with that approach? Because
yeah, that's fine.
I'm not representing Maintain Schools, so I wouldn't want to decide either way without hearing from others. Okay. Right then, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you managed to capture all of that, Karina.
Sorry, Sarah, could you just confirm, because I got confused then with what we went. Could you just say which ones we have just voted in and which ones we haven't? I'm not sure just what we agreed, and I got a bit lost in the voting, sorry.
Well, we'll obviously have the minutes afterwards, David. But I
okay, all right, no worries.
Okay, all right. Great, thank you. So then I'll move us on to the next item. Well, I'll move us on to the secondary maintained schools de-delegation options, and I think we've just got the one individual who's able to vote on this. And just remind me, Karina, who is that?
Simon Shaw.
Simon, and right, Simon. Apologies for the one lone voice, but do you support the proposals in terms of de-delegation, or would you like to challenge, comment, respond to any of the proposals?
No, I've made this one fairly straightforward. So I want to support the de-delegation for all areas, but just with a note that obviously I'd like to kind of monitor where we're at with the trade union position next year. I think it's sensible to top up the pot this year with everything that's gone on and could go on. But oh yeah, I just sort of a note to to monitor that for next year, because we wouldn't want to keep topping it, as it were.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll definitely take that note on board. Thank you.
Sorry, does that include the premises insurance as well, or are we deferring that one for January?
No, I think we just said that for primary schools specifically, unless, Simon, you would like to understand a bit more between the RPA and the insurance offer.
I'm personally not feeling that I need to necessarily, but if we're, I'm also happy to look at more information on it if it's something that's being looked at from the primary perspective as well.
Okay, no, thank you for raising it, Travis. It's a good point. If we're going to look at it, we might as well look at it for everybody. So we'll defer the decision on that one until January. But thank you, Simon. That's swift feedback. Thank you. Appreciate that one. But equally, it's good for us to debate these different items and make sure we're doing the right decision for the schools that we're representing. So thank you very much. Right, final item then for this meeting, which is in relation to the scheme for financing schools, which is also for maintained schools. And we've got from page 52 onwards the actual financing schools guidance. And then we've got some changes that we're proposing that we've consulted on. And I think, Abby, this is for you to take us through that one, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. We are proposing a revision to our scheme for financing schools, and as Sarah rightly pointed out, this is an item for maintained school representative only to vote on, but members are welcome to contribute in terms of their feedback. In terms of background and context, the current scheme for financing school was last updated in May 2017, and we're supposed to revise the scheme for financing schools every year. There are a few things that tend to feed into it. The DFE and ESFA tends to make some mandated revision to the scheme for financing schools, and when they do that every year, we are supposed to adopt that. We don't have any option, we don't have any say in terms of those mandated changes. But there are other areas where the local authority might feel that, look, we need to do some things, either because of local practices or for one reason or the other. Those are the kind of revisions that maintained schools members of the forum needs to vote on and approve and agree. Be that as it may, as I've said, we've not had a revision since 2017. There have been attempts made in the past to revise the scheme for financing schools, and that's in some cases have not gone very well with the schools forum, and therefore it's been coming back ever since. The current revision was consulted upon on the 5th of October, and the consultation closed on the 8th of November. There is a link there to the consultation papers if people are interested, because I intentionally asked that they be left on the website so that we can still look at them and see the questions that were consulted upon and how we arrive at the consultation document itself. But I'll quickly go into the response to the consultation, then we can come back into what I'm proposing that maintained school members of the forum vote on and approve. In all, we only had 11 responses out of 69 early maintained schools. When I asked around, they said, that's about right. Okay, I know that this kind of proposal doesn't really get a lot of responses nationally. In most other places where I've worked, it's always been a very few respondents, that are really interested in the nitty-gritty of the financial framework guiding the relationship between the local authority and its maintained schools. That, we are where we are. So we've looked at these responses, and the summary is in table 1. There's a detailed responses in appendix A, further down this paper. What we've tried to do after that is to look at main areas where either the questions were not answered, people were saying they're not sure, or they disagree with the proposal, or they just didn't answer the question at all. And that is what we've tried to sort of further analyze down the paper, and to provide some local authority responses to those to those areas just to clarify what we're trying to achieve. Because of the time lag between when the last scheme was approved and now, there are some practices that we've adopted, either due to like SFVS, for example, where there have been other instructions from the DFE, and we've adopted those practices. So this scheme is trying to catch up with those practices in some respect. So that confused a few respondents in terms of, oh, we're already doing this. Why are you asking us about this again? You know, also is the fact that where we think there are, like we based on the responses that we had, we've made some adjustments to two areas of the scheme. You know, one is in relation to you know, assets that can easily be portable assets, I call them. You know, and we try to clarify why we want schools to have an inventory of those type of assets, because, you know, they are easily portable. They can. We don't want schools to lose them, not just from the cost perspective. Some of them might hold very valuable information and data. So that's why it's good for them to have an inventory, as somebody is managing that inventory. There's also issue about whether that will result in additional bureaucracy. No, we don't think, we are not asking schools this inventory. That inventory of assets is in place, and they are checking it on a regular basis. We need to, maybe as a result of an investigation or an inquiry or some other things, that the chief financial officer can it is there and it's working perfectly. As a result of I mean, the responses we've had to like put like a de minimis in terms of, you know, we think it's left for school to decide if an asset has a value of £1,000 or less. You know, they can decide whether they want to include it. We've sort of tweaked. That would be one of the differences you will see between the scheme that was on the website, which we consulted on, and the one that is the attachment to this paper. You know, that's one area of change that we've made. The other area that we've made a slight change into the scheme is in relation to insurance for use of school premises. You know, where we're saying that, look, there's a one-off insurance that we're proposing that people who want to use school premises should take out. You know, and that will cost £20, and that will be for people who just want to use it, maybe school hall for events or school field for Sunday football or whatever it is that they want to do. But however, if an organization have their own public liability insurance, they don't need to take out this £20 thing. They just need to provide school with evidence of their public liability insurance, and that will suffice. The other thing around that is where some of the users of these school assets might be very small organizations, and they just want to have it for a breakfast meeting or whatever it is. School can decide to ask for a 2 million public liability insurance cover, and we're looking at, you know, does this cost a lot of money? And when I spoke with our insurance colleagues, they said, no, it doesn't cost. You know, public liability insurance at 5 million, even at 2 million, the price difference is not that much between 2 million and 5 million. And it's readily available in the market. There's a lot of competitive quotes for this type of insurance. So that's another area that we've made a slight tweak to the proposed consultation. I won't go through all the detail. Yeah, I won't go through all the paper in detail, you know, other than mention those areas where we've made changes based on the responses we've received. So yeah, I'm open for comments and questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Abby. And for taking us through those changes and also feeding back on the consultation responses and how we've then considered those in terms of the proposals. Very helpful. Any questions from anyone or any comments for Abby? Chris?
Yeah. So in terms of the consultation part of it, you know, as the results sort of highlight there, I think the majority, if not everybody, but the significant majority were in favour of the changes. Having taken time to read the whole document, there are a number of things in there that do flag up as, should we say, question marks, which weren't part of the consultation. Along the lines of, for example, let me just have a look a second. There's a number of times where it refers to the chief financial officer. Who would that be from Bristol City Council? Because when I looked at the structure, I couldn't see there was one.
Currently, the chief financial officer, who is also the section 151 officer, is Dennis Murray.
Denise, is it? Right. So it's only because it refers to the terminology in there. It doesn't say it on the council website. That was the only thing. The one major thing is the fact that will the financial regulations for schools with delegated budgets be being updated within the same timeline as this? Because obviously at the moment they're not in sync.
Yes, because of, that is being revised as we speak, and we're trying to go through line by line to make sure that everything is in sync. So where there are references to the regs, as I call them, you know, as I call the paper, I'm making sure that we are capturing some of the instruction in the scheme, so that the regs is more prescriptive. It's more like, okay, the scheme is saying do this, but this is how you can do it. These are sample templates you can adopt. These are checklists that you can tick off in order to conform with the scheme. So that's the way I'm checking it, you know, and that's, once that is completed, that will also come back to the school forum.
So when it, because I think this is going to be introduced as the 1st of April, isn't it? Scheme So it as of the 1st of April, they'll both be in sync, because obviously that's what we want to do. The other point in there, just one more point, and it's to do with, let's have a look a second, 11.5.2. It refers to the health and safety situation. And it says the governing bodies are required to adopt the LA's policy on health and safety as set out in the LA's Health and Safety Manual for Schools. I don't believe that exists.
I will look, I will check, because this 11.5.2 is not a new provision. It was there in 2017. So I'd like to believe that that policy exists, and I can check with my health and safety colleagues.
Yeah, they're the people who've told us it doesn't.
Wow. Okay.
They said that manual disappeared quite some time ago. So prior probably to 2017 as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for raising those points. I think Abby's made a good point to say that we're sort of approving the suggested changes that bring it up to more relevant legislation. But there may be some points in the actual existing guidance that we're not looking at today that might be ones to take away. So the health and safety one looks like it's one that we need to take away in terms of a potential future revision, just to bring it up to where it needs to be. Okay, any other comments from anyone else? Okay, so we've had the feedback. We've got some points that we wanted to discuss. So I'll now hand over to our maintained colleagues to vote. Is everyone, so I'll revert to previous voting options, which is, does anyone object to the proposals that are within the paper? Okay, I can't see any hands up on that one. So I think we've got those approved. Thank you very much, Abby. Okay. Right, and I think that brings our meeting to a close, unless I've missed anything. Are there any other items of any other business? I don't see any hands up. No, okay. So we've got our next meeting in January, which is going to be focused around actually approving some of those items that we've discussed during this meeting, and to pick up a couple of the carry forwards from this meeting, and we'll get an update on the transformation programme as well. So I think that's it in terms of this meeting. So thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your feedback and support with the Forums business, and I hope you all have a good festive break when you get to it. Thank you very much, everyone.